I was slicing tomatoes for dinner when my son Bradley announced he'd be managing my finances starting next month. "Mom, starting next month will transfer all your money to my account," he said casually as if discussing the weather. His wife Sandra nodded beside him, already eyeing my grandmother's china cabinet. I just smiled, continuing to prepare their weekly free dinner. That night, as always, they came hungry and left satisfied. But when they walked into my house the following week, both of them screamed in shock. My name is Coral, and at 67 years old, I thought I had entered the peaceful chapter of my life. After spending 35 years as a bank manager in Hartford, Connecticut, I had retired with a comfortable pension and the knowledge that my financial future was secure. My husband George had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me not just with an aching heart, but also with his life insurance policy, our joint savings, and investments that totaled $1.2 million. Our colonial home on Maple Street had been paid off for over a decade, and I took pride in maintaining its white shutters and wraparound porch, just as George would have wanted. My days had settled into a pleasant routine. Monday mornings found me at the Hartford Public Library, where I volunteered teaching computer basics to other seniors. Tuesday afternoons were reserved for managing my investment portfolio, a task I genuinely enjoyed after decades in banking. Wednesdays meant book club with my dearest friends, and Thursdays I spent tending to my garden where George's roses still bloomed every spring. But Fridays had always been special because that's when I hosted dinner for my children. I have 2 children who couldn't be more different. My daughter Sarah, 38, and brilliant, worked as a pediatric surgeon in San Diego. Despite the distance, she called every other day and visited twice a year with her husband Marcus and their daughter Lily. Then there was Bradley, 42, my eldest, who lived just 20 minutes away in West Hartford with his wife Sandra and their 17-year-old twins Aiden and Emma. Bradley had once been so ambitious. Fresh out of college with a business degree, he'd entered real estate with grand dreams of building an empire. For a while, it seemed he might succeed. He wore expensive suits, drove a BMW, and spoke confidently about market trends and investment opportunities. But somewhere along the way, the ambition had soured into something else. The confident smile became strained, the suits grew worn at the edges, and the BMW was quietly traded for a Honda. Sandra had been a nurse when they met 15 years ago. She was pretty in that carefully maintained way, with highlighted hair and manicured nails that never seemed to chip. After the twins were born, she quit working, declaring that being a mother was job enough. I supported her decision then, believing every family should choose what worked for them. But as the years passed, I noticed how her conversation topics narrowed to shopping, decorating, and comparing possessions with her country club friends. The shift in their behavior toward me began 6 months ago, so gradually I almost missed it. During one Friday dinner in January, Bradley casually asked about my mortgage while carving the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon preparing. "Mom, you must be relieved to have the house paid off." He said, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "Oh yes, your father and I were very proud when we made that final payment," I replied, passing the green beans to Sandra. "And your monthly expenses can't be too high for just one person," Sandra added, her smile not quite reaching her carefully made-up eyes. "I mean, this is such a big house for someone living alone." I felt a small flutter of unease but pushed it aside. "I manage quite well, dear. The house is just the right size for me." Over the following weeks, their questions became more persistent. Bradley wondered aloud about my utility bills, suggested I was wasting money on lawn care, and expressed concern about my excessive grocery shopping. "Mom, you donate how much to the church monthly?" he asked one evening, his fork suspended midway to his mouth. "The same amount your father and I always have." I responded calmly, though I noticed how Sandra's eyes narrowed at my answer. "And you're still sending money to help with Lily's college fund?" Sandra's voice carried a note of accusation. Sarah's husband is a radiologist. They hardly need your help. The atmosphere at these dinners grew increasingly tense. Bradley began arriving unannounced during the week, often when I was out volunteering. I'd come home to find him in my father's old study papers slightly rearranged on the desk drawers, not quite closed the way I'd left them. "Just checking on you, Mom," he'd say with that strained smile. "You weren't home, so I let myself in to make sure everything was okay." One afternoon, I returned early from the library to find Sandra in my bedroom, photographing the contents of my jewelry box with her phone. "Oh, Coral," she startled, nearly dropping the device. Bradley asked me to help you organize. Some of these pieces should really be in a safety deposit box." I maintained my composure, though my pulse quickened. How thoughtful, but I have everything exactly where I want it. The pressure intensified during a Sunday dinner in late February. Bradley had been particularly agitated that day, drumming his fingers on my dining room table and exchanging meaningful looks with Sandra throughout the meal. "Mom, we need to talk about your future," he announced as I served apple pie. "You're not getting any younger, and managing finances these days is complicated. There are scammers everywhere targeting seniors." "I spent 35 years managing other people's finances, Bradley. I think I can handle my own." "That's just pride talking," Sandra interjected, her tone syrupy sweet. "We only want what's best for you. Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about bills and investments? Bradley could handle all that for you." The conversation continued in this vein until they left, but not before I caught a telling moment. As I cleared dishes in the kitchen, I heard Sandra's voice drift in from the powder room. She was on the phone speaking in hushed but urgent tones. "Just a few more months, Cynthia," she said to whoever was on the other line. "Once we have control, we'll move her to that cheaper assisted living place in Bridgeport. This house alone is worth $400,000, and she's just sitting on all that money while we're drowning in debt." My hands stilled on the dishcloth. The china plate I was drying suddenly felt very fragile, very precious. I set it down carefully, my mind racing, even as I kept my movements normal. When Sandra emerged from the powder room, I was humming softly, wiping down counters as if I hadn't heard a word. "Need any help, Coral?" she asked, and I saw her eyes scan my kitchen, already calculating values. "No, dear, almost done. You two drive safely now." As their car pulled away, I stood at my front window watching their taillights disappear into the darkness. The house that had felt like a warm embrace suddenly seemed vulnerable, and I realized with crystal clarity that my son and his wife didn't see me as a mother to be cherished, but as a problem to be solved and a resource to be harvested. That night I sat in George's old leather chair, running my fingers over its worn arms. "What would you think of your son now?" I whispered to the empty room. But I already knew the answer. George had always said I was too trusting, too willing to see the best in people, especially our children. It seemed I was about to learn just how right he had been. 3 weeks after overhearing Sandra's phone conversation, the situation escalated dramatically. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was reviewing my investment statements at the kitchen table when I heard Bradley's key in the front door. He rarely visited on weekdays, which immediately put me on alert. "Mom!" he called out, and I heard the heavy footsteps of his work boots on my hardwood floors. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying a leather briefcase I'd never seen before, his face set with determination. "Bradley, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting you today." He pulled out a chair and sat down without invitation, placing the briefcase on my clean tablecloth. "We need to have a serious conversation, Mom. Sandra and I have been doing a lot of thinking and research." "Oh!" I kept my voice neutral, though I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he opened the briefcase. "We've been worried about you, really worried, and we've found the perfect solution." He pulled out a stack of official-looking documents, spreading them across my table like a card dealer showing his hand. We've set everything up to transfer your accounts to mine, for your protection. I reached for my reading glasses, taking my time to put them on while my mind raced. These look very official, Bradley. You've certainly been busy. We consulted with professionals, he said quickly. Financial advisors who specialize in elderly care. I picked up the first document, scanning its contents. They'd been thorough. There were transfer forms for all my investment accounts at Fidelity, authorization forms for my bank accounts at Chase, and most disturbing of all, a new will that named Bradley as sole beneficiary, completely cutting out Sarah. What about your sister? I asked quietly. Sarah lives in California, Mom. She can't take care of you like we can. We're here. We're sacrificing so much to look after you. The word sacrificing hung in the air between us. I continued reading, noting they'd already opened a joint account at Bradley's bank with his name listed first. Dad would want us to take care of you, Bradley pressed on. You know he would. He always said family takes care of family. I set down the papers carefully. Your father also said that a person's independence was their greatest asset. Bradley's face flushed. Don't you trust your own son? After everything I've done for you, I drive you to appointments. We come for dinner every week. Sandra helps with your shopping. I drive myself to appointments, Bradley, and I've been doing my own shopping for 50 years. His tone shifted, becoming harder. You're being stubborn. This is for your own good. What happens when you forget to pay a bill? What happens when scammers call and you give them your credit card? It happens to seniors all the time. The only person asking for access to my accounts is sitting at my kitchen table right now. The words hung between us like a challenge. Bradley's jaw clenched, and I saw something ugly flash across his face before he composed himself. Fine, he said, gathering the papers. Think about it. But this offer won't be on the table forever, Mom. Sandra and I are trying to help, but if you want to be vulnerable and alone, that's your choice. After he left, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall, I sat for a long moment in the quiet kitchen. Then I picked up my phone and called Janet Morrison, my former colleague who now managed the local Chase branch. Janet, it's Coral. I need you to put some additional security measures on all my accounts immediately. The next Friday's dinner was a carefully orchestrated guilt trip. Bradley arrived with the twins, who usually only joined us once a month. Aiden and Emma were good kids despite their parents' influence, but I could see they'd been coached. Grandma, Emma said over salad, her young face serious. Madison's grandmother just gave her family money for a new car. She said grandparents are supposed to help when families need things. Is that so? I replied, noting how Sandra avoided my eyes. Aiden jumped in next. Our college counselor says we need to start looking at schools, but Dad said we might not be able to afford good ones. He said some grandparents help with that stuff, but not all grandparents care enough. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Still, it hurt to see my grandchildren being used as weapons. I've already set aside education funds for both of you, I said calmly. They'll be available when you turn 18. But Mom, Bradley interjected, those funds would be so much better invested if I managed them. The market's been volatile. You need someone who understands modern trading. Sandra had brought props this time. Throughout dinner, she left assisted living brochures strategically placed where I'd see them. Sunset Manor, Golden Years, Community Bridgeport Senior Living. That last one was the facility she'd mentioned on the phone. My friend Dorothy just moved her mother to Sunset Manor, Sandra mentioned casually while helping clear plates. She's so much happier there. No more worrying about this big house, no more maintenance, no more lonely nights. And the best part is selling the family home covered years of care. How convenient for Dorothy, I responded dryly. The following week, Bradley insisted on accompanying me to my regular checkup with Dr. Patterson. I'd been seeing him for 15 years, and he knew me well. Bradley barely let me get a word in during the appointment. "Doctor, I'm concerned about my mother's memory," Bradley announced before Dr. Patterson could even greet us. "She's been forgetting things, seeming confused. Just last week, she forgot she'd already salted the soup and added more. I hadn't made soup last week, but I kept quiet, curious to see how far Bradley would go. Has she mentioned any episodes of confusion to you, dizziness, difficulty managing daily tasks?" Dr. Patterson, bless him, looked directly at me instead of Bradley. "Coral, have you been experiencing any of these symptoms?" "Not a one, doctor. In fact, I just finished organizing the library's new computer system and balanced my investment portfolio for the quarter. The examination was thorough, including cognitive tests that I passed with flying colors." Dr. Patterson's conclusion was clear. "Your mother is in excellent health both physically and mentally. In fact, she's one of my sharpest patients." Bradley's frustration was visible as we left the office. "He doesn't see you every day like I do," he muttered. "No," I agreed. "You see me once a week for free dinner." That evening, Janet from the bank called with disturbing news. "Coral, I wanted you to know that Bradley's been calling repeatedly trying to get information about your accounts. He claimed you were showing signs of dementia and he needed to protect your assets. Of course, we didn't give him any information, but I thought you should know." "Thank you, Janet. I appreciate your diligence." "There's more," she continued. "He showed up in person yesterday with a woman who claimed to be a social worker. We asked for credentials and they left quickly." My blood ran cold. The situation was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. That night, I made 2 important phone calls. The first was to Margaret Thornton, my estate attorney. The second was to my daughter Sarah in California. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah's voice was immediately concerned. "It's late there." "I'm fine, sweetheart, but we need to talk about your brother." I told her everything from the first suspicious questions to the attempted bank access. Sarah's silence on the other end grew heavier with each revelation. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said. "Bradley called me last week talking about your declining mental state and suggested I sign papers supporting his financial guardianship. Mom, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow." "No, not yet," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "I need to handle this carefully, but I want you to know what's happening. Mom, this is elder abuse. We need to contact authorities." "All in good time, dear. Your mother didn't work in banking for 35 years without learning a thing or two about protecting assets. But Sarah, don't sign anything Bradley sends you." "Never," she said fiercely. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have visited more, been there more." "Nonsense. You have a life and career 3,000 miles away. That doesn't make you any less my daughter or any less loved. Bradley's choices are his own, not a reflection on you." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house looking at the family photos covering my mantle. There was Bradley at 10, grinning gap-toothed while holding a baseball trophy. Sandra at their wedding, radiant in white lace. The twins as babies, peaceful in their cribs. When had that loving boy become a man who would try to rob his own mother? When had greed replaced gratitude? But I had no time for sentiment. If my son wanted to play financial hardball with a woman who'd spent decades in banking, he was about to learn just how out of his league he really was. The morning after my conversation with Sarah, I woke with a clear sense of purpose. George used to say I was at my best when facing a challenge, and he was right. I dressed carefully in my navy suit, the one I used to wear for important bank meetings, and set my plan in motion. My first stop was the law office of Margaret Thornton on Farmington Avenue. Margaret and I had known each other for 20 years, ever since she'd helped establish my mother's estate. Her office, lined with law books and diplomas, always made me feel protected. "Coral, lovely to see you." She greeted me warmly, though her expression grew serious as she noticed my formal attire. "This isn't a social visit, is it?" "I'm afraid not, Margaret." I need to review my estate planning, particularly the trust George and I established. For the next hour, I detailed Bradley's increasingly aggressive behavior. Margaret took notes, her expression growing more concerned with each revelation. "The good news," she said finally, "is that you and George were very smart when you set up your irrevocable trust 5 years ago. All your major assets, including the house, are protected. Bradley can't touch them without your explicit consent, which would need to be witnessed and verified as given freely. What if he claims I'm not competent? That's a high bar to clear legally, especially with your recent clean bill of health from Dr. Patterson. But Coral, this situation is serious. We need to document everything." Margaret helped me understand the full scope of my protections. The trust named both my children as eventual beneficiaries with Sarah as co-trustee. Any changes would require extensive documentation and Sarah's agreement. Bradley had no idea this trust existed because we'd created it quietly after George's diagnosis, wanting to ensure everything was properly arranged. My next stop required more courage. I'd never hired a private investigator before, but Dorothy Chen from my book club had recommended someone discreet and professional. Thomas Kellerman's office was in a modest building downtown, nothing like the dramatic settings I'd seen on television. "Mrs. Anderson," he greeted me, offering coffee, which I gratefully accepted. "Dorothy spoke highly of you. How can I help?" I explained my situation, trying to remain factual despite the emotion threatening to break through. Thomas listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. "I need to know about my son's financial situation," I concluded. "Something's driving this desperation, and I suspect it's worse than simple greed." "Leave it with me," Thomas said. "I should have preliminary information within a week. And Mrs. Anderson, I'm sorry you're going through this. No parent should face what you're facing." While Thomas investigated, I set my own trap. During the next Friday dinner, I became the actress I never knew I could be. "You know," I said casually while serving roast chicken, "I've been thinking about what you said, Bradley. Managing everything is becoming overwhelming." Sandra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Bradley leaned forward eagerly. "Really?" he asked. "Well, I was trying to balance my checkbook yesterday, and the numbers just wouldn't add up right. And then I got a call about some investment opportunity, and I couldn't follow what they were saying." None of this was true, but I delivered it with just the right amount of frustrated confusion. "Those are exactly the kind of things we could handle for you," Sandra said quickly. I let slip other carefully crafted pieces of misinformation over the evening. A mention of a $500,000 CD that would mature soon non-existent. Confusion about which bank held my main account's deliberate misdirection. A comment about feeling tired lately. Complete fabrication. After they left barely containing their excitement, I implemented the next phase of my plan. My book club wasn't just a social gathering, it was a brain trust of accomplished women. Besides Dorothy, the former FBI agent, there was Helen Crawford, who'd been chief accountant for Aetna before retiring, and Judge Margaret Phillips, who'd spent 30 years on the Connecticut Superior Court. We met at Dorothy's house that Wednesday, supposedly to discuss our latest novel. Instead, I laid out my situation. The reaction was immediate and fierce. "That little weasel," Helen said, setting down her tea with a sharp clink. "Coral, we're not letting him get away with this." "What do you need from us?" Dorothy asked, already in investigator mode. "Witnesses," I said. "Documentation. And honestly, just knowing you're all aware of what's happening makes me feel safer." Margaret Phillips leaned forward. "I still have connections in the legal community. If this escalates, you'll have the best representation in the state." Dorothy offered something even more valuable. "I have recording equipment from my bureau days, all legal for Connecticut as long as one party consents. Let's document everything from now on." We spent the next hour planning. Dorothy would help install discrete cameras in my home's common areas. Helen would review my financial statements to ensure everything was properly protected. Margaret would research Connecticut's elder abuse laws and precedents. You know, Helen said as we prepared to leave, my late husband always said the best defense is a good offense. Maybe it's time Bradley learned what happens when you come for a financial professional. That weekend, Dorothy arrived with a small bag of equipment. The cameras were tiny, easily hidden among my regular decorations. We placed them strategically in the living room, dining room, and kitchen, the areas where Bradley and Sandra spent most of their time during visits. These will record to a cloud server, Dorothy explained. Only you and I will have access. The quality is good enough for court if needed. Thomas Kellerman called the following Tuesday with his preliminary findings, asking to meet in person. I drove to his office, my hands steady on the wheel despite the churning in my stomach. Mrs. Anderson, I'm afraid the situation is worse than you suspected. He began sliding a folder across his desk. Your son owes approximately $80,000 in credit card debt across multiple cards. He's 4 months behind on his mortgage for a house that's already underwater on its value. He lost his real estate license 3 months ago for ethics violations involving commingled client funds. Each revelation hit like a physical blow, but Thomas wasn't finished. His wife has been selling items online, everything from jewelry to electronics. Based on the photos and descriptions, some of these items match things reported missing from elderly clients Bradley worked with before losing his license. Oh my God, I breathed. There's more. Bradley took out a loan 6 weeks ago from a less than reputable lender. He told them he was expecting a large inheritance soon due to his mother's terminal illness. Terminal illness. My voice was sharp. I just had a perfect checkup. The lenders he's dealing with won't care about that detail when the payment comes due. Mrs. Anderson, your son is desperate and in deep with dangerous people. This situation could escalate quickly. I drove home in a daze, Thomas's folder on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. My beautiful, bright boy had become someone I didn't recognize. The child I'd raised to value honesty and hard work had turned into a man who would steal from the elderly and plot against his own mother. That evening, Sarah called for our regular check-in. Mom, I've been thinking, I can fly out this weekend. Actually, I said, looking at the hidden camera Dorothy had installed near my china cabinet. That might be perfect timing. But Sarah, when you come, I need you to pretend you don't know anything about Bradley's behavior. Can you do that? Mom, I'm a surgeon. I can keep a poker face through anything, but why? Because I think your brother is about to make his big move, and I want you here when he does. But he can't know we've been talking. Whatever you need, Mom. I'll book the red-eye for Friday night. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking around at the home George and I had built together. Every room held memories, every piece of furniture told a story. Bradley and Sandra saw only property values and assets to liquidate. They had no idea that the real treasure in this house was the wisdom and experience of the woman who lived in it. I pulled out a legal pad and began making lists. Documentation needed evidence to gather people to contact. If Bradley wanted to play this game, I'd show him how it was done by someone who'd spent decades protecting people's assets from those who would steal them. The trap was set. Now I just needed to wait for my son to walk into it. Thursday morning arrived with spring rain pattering against my windows. I sat at my kitchen table practicing my performance in my mind. Everything depended on being convincing. I picked up the phone and dialed Bradley's number, adding a slight tremor to my voice that wasn't entirely false. Bradley, it's Mom. I've been thinking about what you said, and maybe you're right. The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long before Bradley responded, his voice carefully controlled. Mom, are you okay? You sound different. I'm just tired, honey. So tired. Managing everything, the house, the bills. I was up half the night worrying about that investment statement I couldn't understand. Mom, that's exactly why Sandra and I want to help. You don't have to do this alone. I let out a shaky sigh. Could you and Sandra come for dinner tomorrow? We can discuss those papers you brought. I think I'm ready to sign them. Of course, Mom, this is the right decision. You'll see, everything's going to be so much better. After I hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, then called Margaret Thornton. The performance begins tomorrow night. I'll be ready, she assured me. Dorothy and Helen too. Are you sure you want to do this? He's my son, Margaret. I need to give him one last chance to stop this. Maybe seeing me vulnerable will bring back some shred of the boy I raised. But even as I said it, I knew better. The evidence Thomas had gathered painted a picture of desperation that wouldn't be swayed by sentiment. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth. I spent the day preparing both the elaborate dinner and myself. I chose my clothes carefully, selecting a house dress I rarely wore and leaving my hair less styled than usual. Small touches that would suggest declining attention to appearance. Sarah arrived at 4, slipping in through the back door as planned. Seeing her face so full of concern and anger on my behalf nearly broke my composure. My God, Mom, you look. She paused, studying me. Like I'm playing a role. I finished with a wry smile. Help me set the table, and remember you know nothing. I still think we should call the police now, she muttered while placing silverware. Not yet. I need incontrovertible evidence of their intentions. The cameras are rolling, and tonight they'll likely say things they wouldn't if they knew you were here. At 6 sharp, Bradley's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as he and Sandra emerged, Bradley carrying his briefcase, while Sandra held what looked like a bottle of champagne. The celebration before the signing, I thought bitterly. Mom, Bradley called out as they entered without knocking, another recent development. Something smells amazing. I emerged from the kitchen, moving slightly slower than normal, letting my hand rest on the door frame as if for support. Pot roast your favorite, though I think I might have over-seasoned it. I can't seem to taste things quite right lately. Sandra's eyes lit up at this admission. Oh, Coral, that's concerning. Loss of taste can be a sign of, well, various things. We should mention that to your doctor. Through dinner, I continued my performance. I forgot I'd already told them about the church renovation project, repeated a story about the mailman, and twice got up to check if I'd turned off the oven. I hadn't even used it. The pot roast was from the slow cooker. Mom, Bradley said, gently reaching across to pat my hand. This is why we're worried. You're not yourself lately. I suppose you're right. I sighed. It's just so hard to admit I need help. Your father always handled the complicated financial things. That's what family is for, Sandra chimed in, her smile predatory, to step in when things get difficult. After dinner, I suggested we move to the living room to discuss the papers. As planned, I sat in George's old chair, while they took the sofa directly in view of Dorothy's hidden camera. Before we start, I said hesitantly, can you explain again what will happen? I want to understand. Bradley opened his briefcase with eager efficiency. It's simple, Mom. We'll transfer your accounts to ones I can manage. I'll make sure all your bills are paid, your investments are properly handled, and you'll get a monthly allowance for personal expenses. How much? I asked innocently. We were thinking $200 should cover your personal needs, Sandra said. After all, we'll be handling groceries, household expenses, everything important. And the house. Well, Bradley shifted slightly. Eventually, it might make sense to sell. This place is too big for you, and the maintenance must be overwhelming. We found some lovely assisted living communities. But where would I go? Bridgeport Senior Living has an opening, Sandra said quickly. It's very nice, and the sale of the house would cover years of care. I let my face crumple slightly. But this is my home. George and I built our life here. Mom. Bradley's voice took on an edge of impatience. You're not thinking clearly. This house is just walls and floors. What matters is your safety and care. I suppose, I whispered. It's just happening so fast. The faster the better, Sandra muttered, then caught herself. I mean, why prolong the stress? I stood slowly, one hand on the chair arm. Let me get my reading glasses. They're in the kitchen. As I walked away, I heard Sandra whisper urgently to Bradley. She's perfect tonight. Confused, forgetful, compliant. Make sure you document everything. If she tries to back out later, we can use this as evidence of declining capacity. In the kitchen, Sarah stood hidden by the pantry door, her face flushed with fury. I shook my head slightly, warning her to stay quiet. I took my time returning, making sure to bump slightly into the door frame. Sorry, I laughed shakily. Depth perception isn't what it used to be. For the next hour, I let them walk me through every document, asking confused questions, misunderstanding terms, occasionally losing track of the conversation. Bradley grew more confident with each passing minute, while Sandra could barely contain her glee. Now this power of attorney is comprehensive, Bradley explained. It covers financial decisions, medical decisions, even living arrangements. It's for your protection. What if Sarah doesn't agree? I asked. Sarah lives in California, Sandra said dismissively. She can't provide daily care like we can. Besides, we've already prepared documents showing our concerns about your capacity. Any court would side with the family members who are actually present. You've already prepared documents. I let surprise color my voice. Bradley had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Just in case. We've been documenting your confusion memory lapses, that incident with the soup. What incident? See, Sandra pounced. You don't even remember oversalting the soup multiple times. I hadn't made soup in months, but I let confusion cloud my features. I don't understand. When did I make soup? This is exactly why you need our help, Bradley said firmly. Mom just signed the papers. We'll take care of everything. I picked up the pen with a trembling hand, then set it down. Next week. Let me think about it until next week. It's such a big decision. Bradley's jaw clenched. Mom, we've been patient, but this needs to happen now. The investment opportunity I mentioned won't wait, and frankly, every day you delay is another day you could make a serious financial mistake. Or someone could take advantage of you, Sandra added. There are terrible people who prey on confused seniors. The irony of her statement hung in the air. I looked between them, these two people sitting in my home, drinking my tea, plotting my demise into poverty and isolation. 1 week, I said firmly, a flash of my old self showing through. If you really care about me and not just my money, you can wait 1 week. Something ugly passed over Bradley's face before he forced a smile. Of course, Mom. 1 week, but no longer. As they prepared to leave, Sandra made a point of measuring my dining room with her eyes. You know, Coral, when you move to somewhere smaller, you won't need this big dining set. I know someone who would pay good money for antique mahogany. I'm sure you do, I murmured. After their car disappeared down the street, Sarah emerged from the kitchen practically vibrating with rage. How dare they? She seethed. Mom, we're calling the police right now. That was attempted financial elder abuse, plain as day. Not yet, I said, suddenly exhausted from the performance. We need more. They need to actually attempt something concrete, not just pressure and manipulate. Mom, you heard them. They're already telling people you're incompetent. I smiled grimly. Let them. Next week, they'll discover just how incompetent I really am. But Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to stay in town without them knowing. Can you work remotely for a few days? Already arranged. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown under Marcus's name. Mom, what are you planning? I looked at my daughter, so fierce and protective, so different from her brother. I'm planning to give your brother exactly what he thinks he wants. And then he'll learn why your father always said I was the most dangerous person he knew when someone threatened our family. Sarah hugged me tightly. Dad was right about that. But Mom, please be careful. Bradley seems desperate, I finished. And desperate people do dangerous things, which is why next week I won't be facing them alone. As Sarah slipped out the back door to return to her hotel, I reviewed the evening's recording on Dorothy's secure app. Every manipulative word, every admission of their plans, every lie about my condition was captured in crystal clarity. Bradley wanted to play dirty. He had no idea just how much dirt I was willing to dig up to protect myself. The boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a bank account to drain. Next week, that stranger would learn what happened when you tried to con a woman who'd spent her career protecting people from exactly this kind of betrayal. The week passed in a blur of final preparations. I met with Margaret Thornton twice more, ensuring every legal protection was in place. Dorothy and Helen helped me compile the evidence into a comprehensive file. Thomas Kellerman provided additional disturbing information about Bradley's debts, including photos of him meeting with known loan sharks outside a warehouse in Hartford's North End. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear. I woke early, my mind sharp despite having barely slept. Today was the day my son would learn who his mother really was. At 9 o'clock, I called Bradley. I'm ready to sign the papers today. Can you come by this afternoon, maybe around 2? Of course. His eagerness was painful to hear. Mom, you're making the right decision. Sandra and I will take such good care of you. I know you will, I said, letting him hear what he wanted in those words. We'll bring the notary, he added quickly. Sandra's cousin is licensed, just to make everything official. How convenient. Oh, and Bradley, I might invite my neighbor to witness. You know how I like everything proper. Whatever makes you comfortable, Mom. After hanging up, I made several more calls. Margaret confirmed she'd arrive at 1:30. Dorothy, Helen, and Judge Margaret Phillips would come separately, parking down the street to avoid suspicion. Sarah was already in position at the hotel, ready to arrive when summoned. I spent the morning setting my stage. The dining room table was cleared and polished chairs arranged formally. I placed George's photo prominently where I could see it, drawing strength from his steady gaze. Then I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Bradley's college graduation. If this was to be a funeral for the son I thought I'd raised, I would dress appropriately. At 1:30 sharp, Margaret Thornton arrived. I watched from the window as she parked her modest Honda briefcase in hand. To anyone watching, she looked like a harmless elderly neighbor. Ready, she asked as I let her in, as ready as any mother can be to expose her son's betrayal. I led her to the dining room. They'll be here in 30 minutes. The others? Dorothy's in the kitchen. Helen and Judge Phillips are in the living room. Everyone's in position. Margaret squeezed my shoulder. You don't have to do this, Coral. We have enough evidence to go directly to the authorities. No, I said firmly. He needs to show his true colors completely, and I need to know if there's any shred of conscience left in him. At exactly 2 o'clock, Bradley's BMW pulled into my driveway, followed by an unfamiliar Toyota. 3 people emerged Bradley in his best suit, Sandra in a dress I recognized from my birthday dinner last year, and a young woman who must be the cousin notary. I opened the door before they could knock. Right on time. Please come in. Bradley kissed my cheek, and I tried not to flinch at the Judas gesture. Sandra air-kissed near my face, already looking around as if cataloging her future possessions. Mom, this is Melissa, Sandra's cousin. She's our notary today. Melissa looked nervous, barely meeting my eyes as she mumbled a greeting. I wondered how much she knew about what she was participating in. How lovely. Oh, I hope you don't mind, but I invited my neighbor to witness as well. Margaret, come meet my family. Margaret Thornton entered from the dining room, and I saw Bradley's slight hesitation. Something about her presence clearly unsettled him, though he couldn't place why. Margaret Thornton. She introduced herself, shaking hands all around. I live just next door. Coral and I have been neighbors for years. We settled around the dining room table, the documents spread before us like weapons. Bradley could barely contain his excitement as he began explaining each one again, his voice taking on the false patience people use with children or the impaired. Now, Mom, remember, this gives me the ability to manage all your finances. It's for your own good. I understand, I said mildly. And this document here, the one about medical decisions, that ensures we can make healthcare choices if you're unable, Sandra explained. Given your recent confusion— My recent confusion, I repeated thoughtfully. Yes, about that. Margaret, you've noticed my confusion lately, haven't you? Margaret smiled pleasantly. I can't say I have, Coral. In fact, you helped me reorganize my entire filing system last week. Your mind seems sharp as ever to me. Bradley's eyes narrowed slightly. Mom's good days and bad days vary. That's why we need to act now while she's having a good day. How thoughtful, Margaret murmured. Tell me, Mr. Anderson, what specific incidents of confusion have you witnessed? Well, there was the soup incident. Which soup incident? I asked innocently. I haven't made soup since Christmas. You see, Sandra jumped in. She doesn't even remember. And there was the time she gave the mailman a check for $1,000. I did no such thing, I said firmly. Mom, you told us about it yourself, Bradley insisted. When? Last month during dinner? Which dinner? We have dinner every Friday. Surely you can remember which specific date. Bradley glanced at Sandra, frustration building. The exact date doesn't matter. The point is you're vulnerable. Speaking of vulnerability, Margaret said smoothly, I'm curious about this sudden urgency. What's prompted the need for immediate action? We've explained this, Bradley said through gritted teeth. Mom needs protection. From whom? A new voice asked. Dorothy emerged from the kitchen, followed by Helen from the living room. Because from where I'm standing, the only threat to Coral is sitting at her dining room table. Bradley's face went white. Who are these people, Mom? What's going on? These are my friends, I said calmly. Dorothy Chen, formerly of the FBI. Helen Crawford, former chief accountant at Aetna. And I believe you know Judge Phillips from your real estate dealings. Judge Margaret Phillips entered last, her presence commanding despite her small stature. Bradley's white face turned green. Your Honor, he stammered. I didn't. What are you doing here? Witnessing something very interesting, she replied, taking a seat. Please continue with your explanation of why your mother needs immediate financial guardianship. Sandra found her voice first. This is an ambush. We're trying to help Coral, and you're making it seem like— Like what? I asked. Like you're trying to steal my money. Like you've already told people I have dementia. Like you've been drugging my coffee during your visits. That's ridiculous, Sandra shouted, but her hand moved instinctively toward her purse. Is it? Dorothy produced an evidence bag. Because I have 3 coffee cups from your last visits that tested positive for benzodiazepine. Your prescription, I believe, Sandra. You can't prove anything, Sandra hissed. Actually, Helen said, producing a tablet, we can prove quite a lot. Would you like to see the video of you discussing moving Coral to Bridgeport Senior Living? Or perhaps the one where you're measuring her rooms for your furniture? You recorded us? Bradley's voice cracked. That's illegal. Not in Connecticut, Judge Phillips said mildly. One-party consent state, and Coral certainly consented to recording in her own home. I stood slowly, all pretense of frailty gone. But let's discuss what's really illegal. Shall we, Margaret? Margaret Thornton smiled. I should probably properly introduce myself. Margaret Thornton, senior partner at Thornton Keller and Associates. I specialize in elder law and financial crimes. Coral has been my client for 20 years. You're her lawyer. Bradley looked like he might be sick. Indeed. And I have here documentation of your attempts to access her accounts without authorization reports from multiple bank employees about your claims of her dementia. And most interestingly, a loan document where you've claimed your mother is terminally ill. I never. Would you like me to read it aloud? Margaret produced the document Thomas Kellerman had obtained. It states quite clearly that you expect to inherit within 6 months due to your mother's pancreatic cancer diagnosis. Curious, since Coral's recent medical exam showed no such condition. It also shows perfect cognitive function, I added. Every test passed with flying colors. This is entrapment, Sandra sputtered. You tricked us. Did I asked. Did I force you to discuss selling my house while I was in the bathroom? Did I make you crush pills into my coffee? Did I compel Bradley to take out fraudulent loans against an inheritance he hasn't received? Mrs. Anderson, the notary, Melissa spoke up shakily. I didn't know. They told me you were sick, that this was to help you. I know, dear, I said gently. You're not in trouble, but I do need you to stay and provide a statement about what they told you to get you here. Mom! Bradley's voice was desperate now. Please, you don't understand. I'm in trouble, real trouble. I owe money to people who don't accept excuses. Sandra and I were desperate. I know exactly how much trouble you're in, I said quietly. $80,000 in credit card debt, 4 months behind on your mortgage, your real estate license revoked for stealing from elderly clients. Oh yes, Bradley, I know everything. Then you know why I need help. Oh, what you need is to face the consequences of your choices. What you wanted was to steal from your mother to fix problems you created. We're family, he shouted. Family helps each other. Family doesn't drug each other. Family doesn't plot to lock away their mother to steal her life savings. Family doesn't lie to medical professionals or take out fraudulent loans. The doorbell rang. Dorothy went to answer it, returning with 2 Hartford police officers and someone I recognized as Detective Patricia Morrison from the Elder Crimes Unit. Good afternoon, Detective Morrison said. I believe we have some business to discuss. Sandra lunged for the door, but Officer Martinez blocked her path. Ma'am, we're going to need you to stay right here. Bradley Anderson and Sandra Anderson. Detective Morrison continued. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult fraud, and in Sandra's case, assault by drugging. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights were read, Bradley stared at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You planned this. You planned all of this. No, son, I said sadly. You planned this. I simply refused to be your victim. Sandra was screaming now, cursing me, calling me names that made the officers tighten their grip. You ruined everything. That money should be ours. You're old. You don't need it. What I don't need, I said clearly, is family who sees me as nothing more than a bank account to pillage. As they were led away in handcuffs, I heard a car screech into the driveway. The twins tumbled out, Aiden and Emma looking terrified and confused. Grandma, Emma called out, seeing the police cars. What's happening? Why are Mom and Dad? I hurried to them, my heart breaking for these innocent children caught in their parents' web of greed. Come inside, loves. We need to talk. The next hour was one of the hardest of my life. Explaining to 17-year-olds that their parents had committed serious crimes, that they'd been arrested for trying to harm me, that their college funds were safe because I'd protected them despite everything. We knew something was wrong. Aiden finally said, his young face old beyond its years. They kept talking about your money-making plans. Emma and we recorded some of it on our phones. You did? Sarah asked. She'd arrived minutes after the arrest, having watched from her hotel window for the police cars. Emma nodded, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. We didn't know what to do. They're our parents, but what they were saying about Grandma, it was wrong. We were scared to tell anyone. You can tell me now, Detective Morrison said gently. Your recordings could be very important evidence. As the teenagers shared their recordings, each one more damning than the last, I realized the betrayal went even deeper than I'd known. Bradley and Sandra had been planning this for over a year, slowly building a case for my supposed incompetence researching which facilities had the worst reputations to save money, discussing how quickly they could sell not just my house, but everything George and I had collected over a lifetime. There's more, Aiden said quietly. Dad. He targeted other old people too, from his real estate work. He'd find out who had money and no close family, then Mom would befriend them and— That's enough for now, Detective Morrison interrupted. You've been very brave, both of you. We'll need full statements, but not today. After the police left with their mountain of evidence after the legal discussions and the plans for what came next, I sat in my living room surrounded by the people who'd stood by me. My real family, I realized. Sarah holding my hand. The twins curled up on either side of me like they used to when they were small. My brilliant, brave friends who'd risked Bradley's rage to protect me. What happens now? Emma asked in a small voice. Now, I said, stroking her hair, we rebuild. Your parents will face justice for their choices, but you two will always have a home with me. Your college funds are secure, your futures are bright, and you'll learn from this that integrity matters more than money ever could. Grandma, Aiden said, I'm sorry for what they did, for not speaking up sooner, for everything. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. You're children who were put in an impossible position, but you chose honesty in the end, and that took real courage. As the sun set on what had been the hardest day of my life, I looked around my home still, mine still safe. The china cabinet Sandra had coveted gleamed in the lamplight. The photos she'd planned to pack away smiled down from the walls. The life George and I had built remained intact, protected by preparation wisdom and the loyalty of true friends. Bradley had been right about one thing. Family does help family. He just never understood that family isn't about blood alone. It's about the people who stand by you when others try to tear you down, who see your worth beyond your bank balance, who protect you not for what they can gain, but because it's right. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and court dates, difficult conversations, and painful consequences. But tonight, surrounded by my true family, I was exactly where I belonged, safe, loved, and free. The sound of sirens fading into the distance left an eerie quiet in my home. Emma and Aiden sat frozen on the sofa, their faces pale with shock. Sarah moved efficiently making tea while I gathered myself to handle what came next. Grandma, they're really gone, Emma whispered. To jail. To the police station first, I explained gently. There will be a hearing to determine bail, then eventually a trial. But why? Aiden's voice cracked. Why would they do this to you? Before I could answer, a car screeched into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Sandra's sister Cynthia practically fall out of her Mercedes, her face twisted with rage. She stormed toward my front door like an avenging fury. Don't answer it, Sarah advised, but I shook my head. She needs to be dealt with. You two stay here. I told the twins, moving to the door with Sarah close behind. I opened it just as Cynthia raised her fist to pound again. You vicious old witch, she screamed. You've ruined everything Sandra was trying to help you, and this is how you repay her. Cynthia, you need to calm down, I said evenly. Calm down. My sister is in jail because of your lies. You've destroyed their lives over money you'll be dead too soon to spend anyway. Dorothy appeared beside me, her phone clearly recording. Ma'am, you're being documented. I suggest you choose your words carefully. Cynthia's eyes widened as she recognized Dorothy. You're that FBI friend. Of course. This whole thing was a setup from the beginning. The only setup Margaret Thornton said, emerging from the dining room where she'd been organizing documents, was your sister's attempt to defraud an elderly woman. I have evidence that this isn't her first attempt. Cynthia's face went white. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I, Richard Morrison 2018, Eleanor Patterson 2020, both elderly, both befriended by Sandra, both suddenly changed their wills before dying under questionable circumstances. Those were natural deaths, which were never properly investigated. Until now. Detective Morrison had returned, apparently anticipating Cynthia's arrival. Ms. Wallace will need to speak with you about your knowledge of your sister's activities. Cynthia backed away. I don't know anything. I'm leaving. I'm afraid not, Detective Morrison said. We have questions about your involvement in the scheme against Mrs. Anderson. Your name appears on several documents. As Cynthia was led away for questioning, still protesting her innocence, I turned back to find the twins in tears. Sarah had her arms around both of them. It gets worse, doesn't it? Aiden asked. This isn't just about us. They've done this before. I sat down beside them, choosing honesty. It appears so, but that's not your fault or your burden to carry. Everyone will know, Emma sobbed. At school, online, everywhere. We're the kids whose parents went to jail for elder abuse. You're the kids who stood up for what was right, I corrected firmly, who chose integrity over blind loyalty. That takes courage most adults don't have. My phone rang. Margaret answered it, her face growing grim. Coral, that was the prosecutor's office. They've been investigating Bradley's real estate dealings. They've found 5 more elderly victims who were pressured to sell below market value or had funds mysteriously disappear during transactions. Oh God, I breathed. How deep does this go? Deep enough that the FBI is now involved. This crosses state lines. Some of the victims were in New York and Rhode Island. Sarah paced the room, her medical training keeping her calm in crisis, but her sisterly rage simmering beneath. How long has he been doing this? How did we not see it? Con artists are expert manipulators, Dorothy said. They show different faces to different people. The Bradley who visited for dinner wasn't the Bradley who stalked vulnerable seniors. The twins' phones buzzed simultaneously. Emma looked at hers and gasped. It's already on social media. Someone filmed the arrest. Turn them off, I instructed. We'll deal with that tomorrow. Tonight you're safe here. A knock at the door revealed our pastor, Reverend Williams, and several members of the church council. Coral, we came as soon as we heard. How can we help? The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Neighbors brought food. Church members offered to stay overnight for security. My book club arrived en masse, forming a protective circle around my family. Bradley told us you were losing your mind, Mrs. Patterson from next door admitted. He said we shouldn't bother you, that you got confused when too many people visited. We should have known better. He was convincing, I said. That's what predators do, they isolate their victims. The twins decided to stay the night, too shaken to go home to an empty house. As I prepared the guest rooms, Emma pulled me aside. Grandma, there's something else. Mom's been taking things from the house. Jewelry, silverware, even some of Dad's watches. She said she was having them cleaned or appraised, but they never came back. Do you know where they went? I followed her once, to a pawn shop on the south side. She had a box full of stuff. I hugged her tightly. Thank you for telling me. You're being so brave. I don't feel brave. I feel like a traitor. Telling the truth about someone's harmful actions isn't betrayal, sweetheart. It's protection for them and their victims. The next morning brought a circus of media attention. News vans lined our quiet street. Reporters knocked on doors seeking comments. Margaret and Sarah fielded calls while I focused on the twins making breakfast and maintaining normalcy in the chaos. Detective Morrison returned with updates. Bradley's bail hearing is this afternoon. Given the scope of the charges and the flight risk, we're recommending no bail. And Sandra? She's been connected to 3 suspicious deaths over the past 5 years. The exhumation orders are being processed. This is now a potential murder investigation. The words hit like a physical blow. Murder. My son had married a possible murderer, brought her into my home, let her near my grandchildren. The twins can't hear this yet, I said firmly. Agreed. We've arranged for counseling services through victim support. They'll need it, and so will you. The bail hearing that afternoon was surreal. Watching my son in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, seeing him reduced to a case number should have broken my heart. Instead, I felt only a deep sadness for the man he could have been. Bradley's lawyer argued for low bail, claiming strong community ties and no flight risk. The prosecutor systematically destroyed each argument, presenting evidence of the hidden passport, the offshore account Sandra had opened the tickets to Costa Rica purchased for next month. Your Honor, the prosecutor concluded, the defendants didn't just plan to steal from Mrs. Anderson. They planned to flee the country afterward, leaving her institutionalized and unable to pursue justice. Bail was denied for both defendants. As Bradley was led away, he turned to look at me, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes, scared and lost. Then the moment passed, and the calculating stranger returned. "This isn't over!" Sandra screamed as she was dragged past. "You'll pay for this, all of you!" Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah and Margaret flanked me as we pushed through. "Mrs. Anderson, how does it feel to send your own son to prison? Do you regret your decision? What message does this send to other elderly victims?" I stopped at that last question, turning to face the cameras. If you're an older adult being pressured by family or caregivers, please reach out for help. You're not alone. No one has the right to steal your independence or your assets, no matter their relationship to you. And to those who prey on seniors, we're not easy targets. We're survivors who've earned our wisdom through decades of experience. Underestimate us at your peril. Back home, I found Aiden destroying something in the backyard. I hurried out to find him attacking his father's old baseball trophy with a hammer. "Aiden, stop." He looked up, tears streaming. It's all lies. Every award, every photo, every memory. He was never the father I thought he was. I gently took the hammer. The father who taught you to pitch was real. The man who cheered at your games was real. People are complex, Aiden. Your father made terrible criminal choices, but that doesn't erase every moment of love you experienced. How can you defend him? I'm not defending his actions. I'm acknowledging that grief is complicated when someone we love becomes someone we can't recognize. You're allowed to mourn the father you thought you had while being angry at the man he became. Emma found us there holding her laptop. "Grandma, I've been researching. There are support groups for families of white-collar criminals. Can we join one?" "Of course, sweetheart. We'll face this together." That evening, as I tucked them into bed like I hadn't done in years, Aiden asked the question I'd been dreading. What if we turn out like them? What if it's genetic or something? I sat on his bed, choosing my words carefully. You've already proven you're not like them. When faced with a moral choice, you chose to protect me. You recorded evidence. You spoke truth despite the personal cost. That's who you are. But there are parents, Emma whispered. Half our DNA comes from them. DNA isn't destiny, Sarah said from the doorway. I have the same parents as Bradley, and I became a doctor who saves lives. You get to choose who you become. As the week progressed, the investigation expanded exponentially. More victims came forward. Bradley's laptop seized as evidence revealed a detailed spreadsheet of elderly targets, complete with asset evaluations and vulnerability assessments. Sandra's phone contained recordings of her practicing different personas, rehearsing conversations designed to build trust before betrayal. The twins returned to school with a police escort after threats were made online. Some classmates were cruel, but others surprised them with support. Their principal called me personally to assure their safety and discuss counseling resources. "Your grandchildren are remarkably resilient," she said. "They're turning trauma into purpose, starting a club to educate students about elder abuse." The investigation into the suspicious deaths yielded horrifying results. 2 bodies showed traces of the same benzodiazepine found in my coffee, but at lethal doses. Sandra had been patient, spending months building trust, becoming indispensable, then slowly increasing the medication until her victims appeared to die naturally in their sleep. "She picked people with no close family," Detective Morrison explained. "Seniors who'd named her in their wills out of gratitude for her friendship. We estimate she netted over $600,000 over 5 years." And Bradley knew? "We can't prove prior knowledge, but he certainly knew about the scheme against you. His financial desperation made him willing to cross lines he might not have crossed before." The trial date was set for 6 months out. 6 months to prepare to heal, to help the twins navigate their new reality. 6 months to transform from victims to survivors. One evening, while sorting through photos for the prosecution, I found Bradley's baby book. His tiny handprint, his first words, "Mama," at 10 months report cards praising his kindness to classmates. Where had that sweet child gone? Sarah found me crying over a photo of 5-year-old Bradley helping me bake cookies. She sat beside me, her own tears falling. "I keep thinking I should have seen it," she said. "I should have visited more, paid more attention." "This isn't your fault, sweetheart. You have a life, a career, a family 3,000 miles away. Bradley's choices were his own." "But you're my mother. I should have protected you." "You did protect me. The moment I called, you were ready to fly here. You helped me see clearly when Bradley tried to gaslight me about your support. You've stood by me through every moment of this nightmare." The doorbell interrupted our moment. I found Pastor Williams on my porch with several congregation members. "Coral, we've taken up a collection," he said, handing me an envelope. "For the twins' college funds. The community wants to ensure their futures aren't derailed by their parents' actions." I was overwhelmed. "This is too generous." "It's what family does," Mrs. Chen from the choir said firmly. "Real family, the family you choose and that chooses you back." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the wreckage of the past weeks. My son and daughter-in-law faced decades in prison. My grandchildren were rebuilding their lives from scratch. Extended family relationships were shattered. The legal bills would be substantial despite Margaret's generous discount. But I was free. Free from the gaslighting, the manipulation, the fear that I was losing my mind. Free to live my remaining years with dignity and autonomy. Free to help my grandchildren become the ethical, caring adults their parents had failed to be. The house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet now, not the tense silence of waiting for the next attack. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more revelations, more opportunities to rebuild. But tonight I was safe in my own home, surrounded by the love of my true family, both born and chosen. Bradley had been wrong about so many things, but most of all about this, I wasn't a weak old woman to be exploited. I was a survivor, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. And I would use every day of my remaining years to ensure that others like me knew they had the power to fight back, too. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse bathroom adjusting the pearl necklace George had given me for our 40th anniversary. The same bathroom where I'd overheard Sandra plotting my demise now served as my preparation room for her sentencing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah knocked gently. "Mom, it's time." The courtroom was packed. Victims from multiple states, their families, reporters, and advocacy groups filled every seat. Bradley and Sandra sat at separate defendant tables, their legal strategy having diverged once the murder charges were filed against Sandra. Bradley had lost 30 pounds in jail, his expensive suit replaced by an ill-fitting court outfit. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. Sandra, in contrast, stared at me with naked hatred, her carefully maintained appearance now showing her true nature. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Lawson. The next 3 hours were a parade of pain. Victim after victim testified about trust-betrayed life savings, stolen final years spent in poverty because of my son and his wife. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson's daughter wept as she described finding her mother's body, never suspecting murder until the investigation began. When my turn came to give my victim impact statement, I walked steadily to the podium. The courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, I stand before you not just as a victim, but as a mother mourning the son I thought I raised. Bradley Anderson was given every advantage: a loving home, excellent education, strong moral examples. Yet he chose to become a predator, targeting society's most vulnerable members. His actions didn't just steal money, they stole trust, dignity, and peace of mind from dozens of elderly individuals. He and Sandra violated the sacred trust between family members, weaponizing love for profit. They planned to lock me away in a substandard facility while plundering everything my late husband and I worked for. But I also stand here as proof that we are not helpless victims. With support from true friends and family, we can fight back. We can seek justice. We can protect ourselves and others from those who would prey upon us. I ask the court to impose the maximum sentence not from vengeance, but from necessity. Bradley and Sandra have shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. They remain dangers to every vulnerable person they might encounter. As I returned to my seat, Aiden squeezed my hand. Both twins had insisted on attending, wanting to face their parents one last time. The other victims spoke with equal power. Mr. Morrison, 83, described how Sandra befriended him after his wife's death, slowly convincing him she was the daughter he'd never had. She'd stolen his retirement savings and family heirlooms, leaving him dependent on Social Security and food banks. Bradley's lawyer made a weak attempt at mitigation, citing financial pressure and Sandra's influence. But when the evidence of his detailed targeting spreadsheet was presented again, showing how he'd rated seniors by vulnerability and asset levels, any sympathy evaporated. Sandra's lawyer tried arguing mental illness, but the prosecution's psychiatrist testified she showed clear signs of antisocial personality disorder, not insanity. She knew her actions were wrong. She simply didn't care. Judge Lawson's voice was steel when she delivered the sentences. Bradley Anderson, you betrayed not only your mother, but your entire community. You held a position of trust as a real estate agent and used it to identify and exploit victims. You showed no mercy to the elderly, and this court shows you none now. 25 years in federal prison followed by lifetime probation and restitution to all victims. Bradley collapsed in his chair. Behind me, Emma made a small sound of grief. Sandra Anderson, your crimes go beyond financial exploitation to murder. You ended lives for profit with calculated cruelty. Life in prison without possibility of parole, consecutive sentences for each murder plus 50 years for the attempted murder of Coral Anderson through poisoning. Sandra lunged across the defense table, screaming obscenities at me before bailiffs restrained her. You destroyed everything. That money was mine. I earned it. You were supposed to die quietly like the others. As they were led away, Bradley turned one last time. Mom, he called out, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I met his eyes steadily. I believe you're sorry you were caught, Bradley. Someday, I hope you're truly sorry for the pain you caused. When that day comes, write to me. Not before. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was intense but organized. Advocacy groups had arranged a press conference. I stood with other victims and their families united in our message. Elder abuse thrives in silence and shame, I said into the microphones. We must speak out, support each other, and demand justice. No one should profit from targeting society's seniors. The Victims' Restitution Fund was officially announced. While we'd never recover everything stolen, the seized assets from Bradley and Sandra's scheme would provide some relief. The twins had refused any money from their parents' assets, insisting it go to other victims. That evening, we held a celebration of sorts at my home. Not a celebration of destroyed lives, but of survival justice and new beginnings. The dining room table that had hosted so many tense dinners now overflowed with food donated by church members, neighbors, and friends. Aiden and Emma had graduated high school with honors despite everything. Aiden would attend UConn on a full academic scholarship studying criminal justice. Emma chose pre-law at Yale, determined to become a prosecutor, specializing in elder abuse cases. I want to be the voice for people like you, Grandma, she said during our toast, so no one else goes through what we did. Sarah's family had relocated from California. Marcus found a position at Hartford Hospital, allowing them to be closer. Their daughter Lily, now 15, had become fiercely protective of her cousins and grandmother. Family protects family, Lily declared. Real family anyway. The book club had evolved into an elder advocacy group. Dorothy used her FBI connections to develop fraud detection workshops. Helen created financial literacy programs for seniors. Judge Phillips lobbied for stronger elder abuse laws. We'd turned our pain into purpose. 6 weeks after sentencing, I received a letter. Bradley's handwriting shaky but recognizable. Dear Mom, I know I said I'd write when I was truly sorry. That day came faster than expected. In here, I have nothing but time to think. To remember the mother who never missed a baseball game, who taught me right from wrong, who showed me what love looked like. I became someone I don't recognize. Greed consumed me until I couldn't see you as my mother anymore, only as an obstacle to money I thought I deserved. Sandra fed that greed, but I made my choices. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy, not the performance we gave at trial. The counselor says I have a lot to unpack about entitlement manipulation and empathy. I'm trying, Mom. Not for parole or forgiveness, but because I need to understand how I became capable of hurting you. I dream about Sunday dinners when I was young. Before the bitterness, before the schemes. Just your pot roast and Dad's stories, and Sarah stealing my dessert. Those were real, weren't they? Even if everything after was a lie. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your son, the real one you raised, is trying to find his way back. Even if it takes the rest of my life. Bradley. I read the letter 3 times, tears falling on the paper. Sarah found me and read it silently, her own tears matching mine. Do you believe him? She asked. I believe he wants to change. Whether he can sustain it through 25 years, time will tell. Will you write back? Eventually, when I'm ready. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. The twins decided to read the letter too, their reactions mixed. Aiden felt hope that his father might redeem himself. Emma remained skeptical, protective of the grandmother who'd saved them. He has to earn it, she said firmly. Words are easy, change is hard. From the mouths of babes indeed. A year later, I stood before another crowd, this time at the state capitol. The Coral Anderson Elder Protection Act was being signed into law, mandating stricter penalties for elder abuse and requiring financial institutions to flag suspicious account activity involving seniors. This law won't bring back the years stolen from victims, I said at the podium, but it might prevent future tragedies. Every senior deserves to age with dignity, safety, and autonomy. The twins flanked me as we watched the governor sign the bill. They'd become powerful advocates themselves, speaking at schools about recognizing abuse, supporting victims, and the complex grief of loving someone who's done terrible things. My house had transformed too. The rooms Sandra had mentally redecorated now hosted support groups, advocacy meetings, and Sunday dinners with chosen family. The china cabinet she'd coveted displayed awards from senior organizations, photos from advocacy events, and handmade gifts from grateful families we'd helped. Bradley continued to write monthly. His letters showed genuine progress, discussing therapy insights, apologies to other victims, and memories of the father George had been. I'd begun writing back short notes, acknowledging his efforts while maintaining boundaries. Sandra had been less graceful. Her appeals exhausted, she'd attempted to attack another inmate who reminded her of me. She remained in solitary confinement, her hatred burning undiminished. On quiet evenings, I often sat in George's chair, his photo in my hands. "We raised him right," I'd whisper. "He just lost his way." In my heart, I believed George would be proud of how I'd handled everything. Proud that I'd protected myself and others. Proud that I'd turned victimization into advocacy. Proud that I'd shown our grandchildren how to stand up to wrong, even when it wore a familiar face. The phone rang one evening. Another senior, another family member trying to gain control of assets. Dorothy and I would visit tomorrow, bringing our recording equipment and hard-won expertise. "You're not alone," I told the frightened voice. "We'll help you fight back." Because that's what family does. Not the family that tries to steal from you, but the family you build through shared struggle and mutual support. The family that sees your worth beyond your bank balance, that protects your dignity along with your assets. My table was smaller now, with Bradley's and Sandra's chairs removed. But the remaining seats overflowed with love, respect, and genuine care. The fortune they'd tried to steal had been nothing compared to the wealth of community I'd discovered in fighting back. As I prepared for bed, I noticed the twins' graduation photos on my dresser. Two young adults headed toward bright futures, determined to fight injustice and protect the vulnerable. From the ashes of betrayal had risen the next generation of advocates. Bradley had been wrong about everything, but especially this kindness wasn't weakness. Trust wasn't naivety. And love, real love, didn't calculate what it could gain, but what it could give. My name is Coral Anderson. I'm 70 years old. I survived attempted elder abuse by my own son, and I'm here to tell you that you can survive too. You can fight back. You can seek justice. You can rebuild. Because your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch, the justice you seek, and the love you share with those who truly deserve a place at your table. The china cabinet stands proud. The house remains mine, and tomorrow I'll help another senior protect what's theirs. That's my fortune. That's my legacy. That's my revenge, living well, helping others, and proving that we elders are not victims, but victors. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you or someone you know is facing elder abuse, please speak up. Contact Adult Protective Services, reach out to advocacy groups, tell someone you trust. You're not alone. And to those who would prey on seniors, we're watching. We're recording. We're fighting back. And we're winning. What would you do if family tried to steal your independence? How would you fight back? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like and share it to spread awareness about elder abuse. Subscribe for more stories of survival and strength. Together, we can protect our elders and ourselves. Until next time, remember your golden years are yours to control. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. With love and determination, Coral.